problem with the government case is twofold. One, they aren't topical. They're talking about the effects of medicine, not necessarily the direct policy cause for healthcare and its industry. Secondly, they don't even solve the problems they claim to, because $250,000 to the demographic of people who would be suing is still enough money to sue regardless. Let's understand how this plays out first through a solvency point and then through a disadvantage. Before I address both of those, I would like to look at the topicality point. They said this is a policy on providers. I agree, it is on providers, but it's not topical for a different reason. And you can tag my response as provision, not compensation. Again, provision, not compensation. What would be topical is providing directly to the hospitals and the doctors medical technology. This does not do that. It instead compensates them after the practice has been done. So it doesn't actually change the quality of medicine at all. It is directly focused on the insurance company, not actually on the hospital. And this has to do with tort law. It's legal, it's not medical. Let's look down at my next response. It addresses the wrong actor. Again, it addresses the wrong actor. It's a small distinction, but it means so much in the scope of the round. Because it's not talking about the healthcare industry. It's talking about tort law and the federal industry. Let's look down at the impact. It isn't topical. Effect versus direct implementation. Again, effect versus direct implementation. You're not focusing on fixing the problem, you're focusing on compensating people after the problem has already happened. You're not changing the quality of care for the patient. Doctors are going to act the same way. Let's understand why. My solvency point is of no effect. Again, no effect. Their plan doesn't have really any effect on whether or not people sue. Let's understand why. Subpoint A is the targeted demographic. Again, subpoint A is the targeted demographic. What do I mean by this? Ask yourself this question. Who are the people most likely to sue? Usually people in the lower socioeconomic bracket, people who are poor, people who are desperate. Those are the kind of people who are likely to sue. Why does that matter? Because those people look at $250,000 and think of it as a lot more than even you and I. And me and you think about it like that's a lot of money, right? Imagine how much more it means to them when they're desperate filing for medical malpractice unjustly. That brings us to the impact. They will still sue. For $250,000, that's worth a lot. They'll do anything to get that. But the second impact is that doctors will still practice defensive medicine. Again, the second impact under the solvency point is that doctors will still practice defensive medicine. They read a statistic in their speech, and I could see you like going over the flow. But the statistic they read was that like a high percentage of doctors, I believe it was over 80%, practice this type of medicine. But they also say that this policy is already implemented in these 3 states. So if that's the case, why do we still see such a high percentage, apparently nationally, of people who are still not following it? What does this mean? This means that people are still going to sue regardless of whether the premiums are set high or low. Because $250,000 is still way too much money for the group of people that this argument is really targeting. Let's look down at the next disadvantage. It's a deterrent to doctors. Again, it's a deterrent to doctors. Doctors to get in good hospitals. My father is part of a medical group, and usually the medical group is the one who pays for the insurance. It doesn't come directly out of the doctor's pocket, it comes from a pool of money. For these medical groups, the higher the insurance cost, usually the better quality of service. Because here's the truth, it's a necessary evil, but a lot of doctors have to deal with people suing them all the time. I know my dad does. Sometimes it's easier to just pay one off here and there than to take every single one to court and bog down the system. So usually what happens is you pay one person a huge sum of money, and then that solves the problem for a while because courts can look at that and say, oh, okay, you did implement malpractice in this one scenario. We use that as justification as to why you don't have to do it again. Why is that important? Because these doctors will be deterred from medical groups who have lower insurance premiums, ironically. Because if they have to pay less, they know that it's still more dangerous for them to operate. We know that's true because the patients are still going to be suing because $250,000 is worth it to them. Meaning that these doctors are not only going to still practice defensive medicine, but the people are also going to still end up getting hurt. Let's look down at a couple arguments they made. They said under the point of $250,000 is substantial, they said the cap works and the evidence disagrees. I would like to contest this argument. The evidence did not disagree. They took it out of context. They weren't talking about their evidence specifically relating to their plan, $250,000. I agree that caps can be the deterrent if it's set lower at like $10,000 or $5,000, but this was not at all directly related to the plan that they set forth. It was just saying that caps work in general. I can agree, but Judge, look at this logically. Obviously, people are still going to sue for that amount of money when they have so much on the line and they're desperate. Let's look down at their next point. Of the inherency point of already being implemented, he said only a few. My first response is on principle. Again, on principle. What the people do, the government can probably do like with 10 times less the efficiency. If we federalize the mandate, it's going to be implemented across all states. This ignores a few key principles. One, the needs of the doctors in specific demographics of people in different states. Every state should have the capability to set that premium at whatever they want, because many states also have different economic situations. If we federalize it, they are now under the blanket of government control, and that shouldn't be within the hands of the federal agency. It should instead be within the hands of the people. They brought up the point under unconstitutional that it is constitutional, and my first response you can tag as not constitutional simply. And the reason for that is not only is it not outlined in the Constitution, but the Constitution is very clear. Any policy that can be delegated to the states without problem should still be delegated to the states. The problem with their plan is they're not solving the problem of malpractice suing and at the same time making a decision that's unconstitutional. It isn't justified by the harms that they've said are set in place. So looking at the big picture, this is what we see. Their plan, even though a good idea, isn't topical. It talks about the effects of medical care. It doesn't talk about the actual compensation or preventative care for those people. We're not helping anybody creating new devices. We're just talking about the insurance companies after the fact. Why does that matter? Because even if you disagree with that point and throw away the topicality point, they still fail on solvency. They have no way to enforce their plan and make sure it works because we've looked at the incentives of the people going to the hospital. They are not the type of people who are going to be probably moral and just. They are desperate people in a lower socioeconomic bracket. They will sue for $250,000 because to them, that is a lifetime's worth of savings, meaning doctors are still going to practice defensive medicine. On top of that, on principle, we should not delegate this to the government. We should delegate it to the power of states because that is what democracy is all about. Not only that, even if you disagree, our final disadvantage that it's a deterrent to doctors is true because most medical groups want high premiums because that ensures good quality of care for their doctors. I know that's true for my dad because he doesn't want to have to deal with all the legal logistics. Sometimes they'll just pay out a big sum to one person and call it good until the next one. It's necessary evil, but it's a lot more efficient than bogging down the court system with a lot of cases, especially since people are still going to sue regardless of how little money you give them. Thank you.